Inflation is a phenomenon that occurs when the prices of goods and services increase over time, leading to a decrease in the purchasing power of a currency. It's a natural part of modern economies, but becomes a severe issue when it accelerates uncontrollably. Essentially, with inflation, the same amount of money buys less than it did before. This can happen for various reasons, such as increased production costs, higher energy prices, and more commonly, due to an increase in the money supply. When a government prints money without backing, or when economic policies undermine the value of a currency, the result can be damaging inflation. It affects different sectors of an economy in various ways. For consumers, it means higher prices for everyday goods, which can erode savings and diminish the quality of life. For businesses, the cost of manufacturing products can rise, squeezing profit margins and possibly leading to layoffs and higher unemployment rates. In severe cases, hyperinflation can result, where prices rise exponentially over a very short time, causing widespread economic turmoil. Such economic challenges were not alien to the Roman Empire, which, despite its vast power and reach, also faced similar pressures. At its zenith, the Roman Empire was an unparalleled political, social, and economic powerhouse. It spanned across Europe, Asia, and Africa, including territories from the rainy highlands of Scotland to the arid deserts of Arabia. The empire was established through a combination of military prowess, strategic alliances, and pragmatic governance. Rome's economy was diverse and sophisticated, consisting of vast agricultural estates, extensive trade networks that reached as far as India and China, and bustling urban centers that were the envy of the ancient world. The economic backbone of Rome was its standardized system of coinage, which facilitated trade both within the empire and with foreign lands. The Roman currency was trusted and valued throughout the known world, a testament to the empire's stability and prosperity. This system of coinage not only supported domestic economic activities but also extended Rome's influence in international markets, integrating a vast network of trade routes that were crucial for the empire's economic expansion. However, maintaining such a vast empire required enormous resources, particularly for the Roman military, which was essential in securing and expanding the empire's borders. This necessity drove the evolution of Rome's economic foundation during the Republic, setting the stage for both its ascendancy and its future vulnerabilities. Initially rooted in agriculture, Rome's economy gradually shifted as it amassed wealth from conquered lands. This wealth was not only in the form of spoils, but also in redistributed agricultural lands, which initially supported the Roman economy. Over time, as Rome expanded further, its economic base also transformed, becoming increasingly reliant on trade and military conquests. This shift marked a significant development from a primarily agrarian society to a complex trading empire, underpinned by its strong military capabilities and extensive economic resources. One of the early economic decisions that had a profound long-term impact was the establishment of a complex tax system and the minting of coinage which facilitated trade and commerce. This system helped fund the expansive ambitions of the Republic, including public works and military campaigns. However, the reliance on conquered lands and slaves from these conquests to sustain economic growth created an unbalanced economy heavily dependent on continuous territorial expansion. Additionally, the practice of allocating land to retired soldiers supported military loyalty and veteran welfare, but also led to the displacement of small farmers, exacerbating wealth inequality and social stratification. This concentration of land and wealth in the hands of a few elite families led to social unrest and a series of political crises, culminating in the rise of populist leaders who promised reforms but often exacerbated fiscal strains through lavish public spending. Such internal tensions and economic disparities set a precarious stage as Rome faced one of its greatest military challenges. The Second Punic War, fought between Rome and Carthage from 218 to 201 BC, was a pivotal moment in Roman history that fundamentally altered its economic landscape. Coming at a time when Rome was already grappling with internal economic and social issues, the war demanded massive expenditures not only for the maintenance and supply of the armies, but also for naval operations and fortifications. Hannibal's invasion of Italy, a direct threat to Rome itself, required an unprecedented mobilization of resources. This intense military engagement further strained Rome's economy, which was already weakened by domestic policies and ongoing social strife, highlighting the complex interplay between Rome's internal management and its external military engagements. The financial strain of the war led to the first significant instances of currency debasement. To meet the demands of war spending, Rome began to reduce the silver content of its coinage, a tactic that provided immediate fiscal relief but set a dangerous precedent for handling economic crises. The war also imposed heavy debts on the state and the populace, particularly on farmers who were unable to tend their fields during the conflict. In the aftermath of the war, although victorious, Rome faced immense debts and economic dislocation. The immediate economic gains from the newly acquired territories in Africa and the indemnities imposed on Carthage did little to stabilize the economy in the long term. Instead, they delayed the economic problems and intensified the reliance on further conquests for revenue. This cycle of warfare and economic exploitation laid the groundwork for future economic difficulties, including increased inflationary pressures as the Republic transitioned into an empire. The Roman Empire's military was both its greatest asset and its most significant liability. As the empire expanded, so did the necessity for a larger military presence to secure its borders and suppress uprisings. Each military campaign, while potentially opening up new territories for revenue through plunder and tribute, also required vast amounts of resources. The logistical challenges of moving, supplying, and maintaining an army across vast distances were enormous. Furthermore, the prolonged presence of Roman legions in conquered territories meant continuous expenditures with often only speculative future gains. These military campaigns were not only costly in terms of immediate expenditures on armaments, provisions, and pay for soldiers, but also in the long-term commitments they necessitated. For instance, after a territory was conquered, Rome was obligated to establish and maintain a provincial administration, build infrastructure, and ensure ongoing military security to prevent rebellion. This cycle of conquest and consolidation placed a recurrent drain on the treasury, often necessitating further conquests to fill the fiscal void, thereby creating a self-perpetuating cycle of military and economic expansion that was unsustainable in the long run. Managing an empire that spanned from the deserts of North Africa to the forests of Northern Europe presented unique financial challenges. The costs associated with administrating such a vast area were colossal. Each province required a governance structure, legal systems, defense mechanisms, and infrastructure such as roads, aqueducts, and public buildings. These projects, while essential for maintaining the Roman way of life and the efficient exploitation of provincial resources, required immense upfront and ongoing expenditures. The economic strain was compounded by the need to maintain peace and stability across diverse regions, each with its own local dynamics and potential for unrest. The Roman response typically involved stationing legions permanently in troublesome or strategic areas, a policy that entailed huge ongoing costs in terms of military pay, supplies, and the logistics of supporting large forces far from home. Additionally, the larger the empire grew, the more resources were diverted from productive investment in the core regions to the defense and management of the peripheries. This redirection of resources often resulted in diminishing returns, as the cost of securing and administering new territories escalated relative to the economic benefits they provided. The fiscal health of the empire was thus inextricably linked to its military prowess and territorial ambitions. While the expansion provided short-term gains and a sense of unstoppable momentum, it gradually eroded the empire's economic foundations, leading to increased vulnerability to both internal inefficiencies and external threats. The relentless drive for expansion had transformed the Roman military from an engine of growth into a source of profound fiscal strain, illustrating the complex interplay between military might and economic stability in one of history's most formidable empires. The denarius, once the backbone of the Roman economy, began its circulation as a high-purity silver coin, esteemed both within and beyond the empire's borders. Its introduction in 211 BCE marked a period of relative economic stability. However, as the financial pressures from sustained military expansions and extravagant governmental spending increased, Roman leaders resorted to reducing the silver content of the denarius to fund their deficits. This debasement process accelerated particularly from the mid-1st century AD under Emperor Nero, who initiated a series of reductions in the silver content of the coin. By the time of the Severan dynasty in the early 3rd century, the denarius contained only about 50% silver, down from nearly 98% during its inception. This trend continued until the crisis of the 3rd century, where amid rampant inflation, civil strife, and economic turmoil, the silver content dropped to negligible amounts, essentially rendering the denarius a bronze coin with a thin silver wash. The steady decline in the denarius's purity mirrored the empire's shifting economic fortunes and growing instability. Each reduction in silver content was an attempt to stretch financial resources further, but had the unintended consequence of undermining trust in the currency itself. The debasement of the denarius had profound implications for Roman trade and commerce. Internally, as the currency's value became unpredictable, merchants and traders faced increasing difficulties in setting prices, which fluctuated wildly as the silver content of the coins continued to diminish. This uncertainty discouraged long-term investments and destabilized market operations, leading to a decrease in commercial activity. Externally, the Roman currency's declining integrity affected international trade relations. The denarius, once a coveted currency across the Mediterranean for its reliability and silver content, began to lose its appeal. Foreign merchants were less willing to accept debased denarii at face value, complicating trade negotiations and reducing the empire's trade surplus. In response, the Roman economy became increasingly insular, relying more on barter systems within its borders and reducing interactions with foreign economies that could have provided much-needed wealth and stability. Moreover, the inflation caused by currency debasement eroded the average Roman's purchasing power. As the prices of goods soared, the standard of living declined, leading to social discontent and increased economic disparity among the populace. The wealthy could often hedge against inflation by investing in land, properties, or foreign currencies that held better value, whereas the poorer sections of society saw their savings and earnings diminish in value. In essence, the decline of the denarius not only reflected the Roman Empire's economic troubles, but also exacerbated them, turning what had been a symbol of Roman prosperity into a marker of its economic fragility. This weakening of a once sturdy monetary standard contributed significantly to the economic instability that plagued the later years of the empire, demonstrating the critical role of stable currency in maintaining economic confidence and functionality. Inflation, particularly when it shifts into hyperinflation, universally impacts society but tends to disproportionately harm the middle and lower classes. In ancient Rome, as the value of the denarius plummeted due to continuous debasement, the cost of living surged dramatically. Basic staples such as grain, oil, and wine saw their prices increase manifold, placing a severe financial strain on ordinary citizens who relied on their wages, which did not keep pace with rising costs. For the middle class, including small business owners, artisans, and lower-tier administrators, the inflation eroded their economic stability. Their savings in denarii rapidly lost value, and the capital needed to sustain or expand their businesses became harder to maintain. As a result, many small enterprises faced financial ruin, leading to a decline in the diversity and vitality of the urban economy. The lower classes, particularly the urban poor and rural peasants, were even more directly affected. They spent a larger portion of their income on food and basic goods, which became increasingly expensive. This situation often forced them into a vicious cycle of debt and poverty. The urban poor, many of whom were dependent on the grain dole provided by the state, found that these handouts no longer sufficed to meet their daily needs due to inflation. The deteriorating economic conditions brought about by hyperinflation severely impacted the quality of life for many Romans. Social unrest became a more common occurrence as the populace grappled with the decreasing purchasing power of their currency. Episodes of food riots and public disturbances became frequent as desperation set in. Health and nutrition deteriorated as diets became less varied and more dependent on whatever could be afforded. In wealthier times, the Roman diet was diverse and enriched with various proteins, vegetables, and fruits. During periods of inflation, however, the diet shifted towards cheaper staples that were less nutritious, leading to health problems and decreased life expectancy among the general population. Moreover, the housing situation worsened. As economic hardship struck, more families found themselves unable to afford proper maintenance of their homes, leading to declining living conditions. Overcrowding became more common as poorer families moved in together to share costs, exacerbating the spread of diseases and increasing the general discomfort of living environments. The overall societal impact was a decline in morale and cohesion. As trust in the currency and the government that issued it diminished, so too did the sense of security and optimism among the people. This erosion of social and economic stability contributed to a more fractious and politically unstable environment, setting the stage for further internal conflicts and challenges to imperial authority. As inflation escalated and the economic situation in Rome became dire, the Roman government under various emperors attempted to implement policies to curb the rampant inflation and stabilize the economy. One of the most infamous of these measures was the Edict on Maximum Prices. Issued by Emperor Dioclesian in 301 AD. This sweeping decree aimed to set maximum prices for over 1,000 different goods and services, from food items to wages, across the entire empire. The intent was to control the spiraling cost of living and prevent profiteering during a time of economic crisis. The edict was also accompanied by severe penalties for violators, including the death penalty for those who sold above the set prices. Despite Diocletian's intentions, the policy was a failure for several reasons. Firstly, it was incredibly difficult to enforce. With the vast size of the Roman Empire, monitoring and ensuring compliance with the edict was nearly impossible. Black markets quickly emerged where goods were sold at true market prices, undermining the official policy. Moreover, the edict did not address the underlying causes of inflation, primarily the continuous debasement of the currency and the excessive expenditure on military campaigns and administration. By focusing only on the symptoms of inflation, rising prices, rather than the causes, the edict was doomed to be ineffective. The failure of Diocletian's edict and similar measures highlights a critical misunderstanding by the Roman government of the economic forces at play. Policies were reactive rather than proactive, and they often ignored the complex economic dynamics such as supply and demand, the velocity of money, and public confidence in the currency. Furthermore, these policies often had unintended negative consequences. For instance, the price caps discouraged production because merchants and craftsmen could not cover the costs of production when forced to sell at artificially low prices. This led to a decrease in the availability of essential goods, exacerbating the shortages and contributing to further economic decline. The government's continued reliance on coin debasement to fund its deficits was another major reason for the failure of these policies. By continuously injecting more debased coins into the economy, the government fueled inflation instead of containing it. Each attempt to solve the fiscal problems through currency debasement further eroded trust in the coinage and the economic stability of the empire. In summary, the Roman government's responses to inflation were largely ineffective because they failed to address the root causes and often worsened the situation. The reliance on severe, punitive measures to enforce compliance, such as those in Diocletian's edict, also alienated the populace and led to widespread evasion and resentment. These failed policies serve as a poignant lesson on the importance of understanding and addressing the fundamental economic factors driving inflation, rather than merely attempting to control its manifestations. Inflation in the Roman Empire did not affect all layers of society equally. It significantly widened the gap between the rich and the poor. As the value of the denarius deteriorated due to continuous debasement, those with fixed incomes found themselves increasingly unable to afford basic necessities. The wealthy, on the other hand, often had access to a broader range of assets such as land, precious metals and imported goods, which retained value or even appreciated during times of inflation. This disparity allowed the upper classes to maintain or enhance their standard of living, while the majority of the population struggled with rising prices and declining purchasing power. Landowners, in particular, benefited during periods of inflation as they could produce agricultural goods, whose prices increased with inflation. In contrast, wage earners, who were paid in debased currency, saw their wages buy less and less. This led to severe social strife as the economic stability of the middle and lower classes deteriorated, pushing more individuals into poverty and creating a fertile ground for social unrest and dissatisfaction with the ruling classes. As the official currency lost its value and the government struggled to enforce price controls, a robust black market emerged throughout the empire. The black market thrived on trading goods and services, at prices that often far exceeded the maximums set by laws such as Diocletian's edict on maximum prices. Since the official market could not meet the demands of the populace under the regulated prices, the black market stepped in to fill the void, although at much higher costs. Moreover, the black market also facilitated the exchange of foreign currency and bartered goods, which were seen as more stable and reliable than the debased Roman coinage. This alternate economy was not just a symptom of economic decay, but became a vital coping mechanism for many Romans, allowing them to obtain necessities that were otherwise unaffordable or scarce in the official markets. The rise of the black market, however, had further negative implications for the economy. It undermined the effectiveness of government policies and fiscal measures intended to stabilize the economy and control inflation. The existence of a widespread and unregulated black market reduced the government's ability to collect taxes, further straining the public coffers and compounding the fiscal crisis. It also represented a loss of control by the state over the economy, signaling a weakening of central authority and contributing to the overall decline of the imperial structure. The combination of exacerbated social inequalities and the proliferation of a black market underlined the profound economic challenges Rome faced. These elements not only fueled economic instability, but also eroded the social cohesion and trust in the governmental institutions necessary for maintaining an empire, illustrating a clear link between economic policy, social equity, and political stability. The Roman military, once the cornerstone of the empire's power and expansion, was profoundly affected by the economic turmoil brought about by inflation. As the value of the denarius plummeted, so too did the real wages of Roman soldiers. Initially compensated with a stipend that was sufficient to support their needs and those of their families, the soldiers found that their pay could no longer keep pace with the rising cost of living. This decline in effective earnings was especially demoralizing, as it not only reduced their ability to provide for themselves, but also diminished the perceived value of their service to the empire. The erosion of soldiers' pay and benefits directly impacted their morale and loyalty, elements critical to the cohesion and effectiveness of the military forces. Discontent grew within the ranks, as soldiers felt increasingly neglected by the state they served. This brewing dissatisfaction occasionally erupted into mutinies and rebellions, where military units would rally behind commanders who promised better pay or conditions, or who opposed current political leadership. The economic instability that characterized the later years of the Roman Empire also catalyzed significant political upheaval. As the central authority struggled to manage the crisis, various provincial leaders and military commanders saw opportunities to challenge the status quo, leading to a series of civil wars and usurpations. These conflicts were not only about personal power, but often had underlying economic grievances, including the debasement of the currency and the uneven impact of inflation. Each bout of civil strife further strained the empire's resources. Wars required funding, and in an already destabilized economy, this often meant even more severe currency debasement and taxation, creating a vicious cycle of economic and political decline. Additionally, these civil wars disrupted trade and agriculture, the backbone of the Roman economy, exacerbating the inflationary spiral and deepening the economic difficulties. The political instability was also reflected in the rapid turnover of emperors during the 3rd century, a period known as the Crisis of the 3rd Century, where more than 20 emperors reigned in quick succession. Many of these leaders came to power through military support, and their reigns were often marked by attempts to solve the economic problems through further financial expedients that only worsened the situation. In essence, the combination of military dissatisfaction and economic hardship created a feedback loop that weakened the structural integrity of the Roman state. As economic policies failed to address the root causes of inflation and discontent, the empire became vulnerable to both internal breakdowns and external threats, leading to a period of significant decline and the eventual fragmentation of the Western Roman Empire. This interplay between military morale, economic stability, and political power highlights the complex dynamics that can lead to the downfall of even the most powerful of empires. As Rome's economic foundation eroded, so too did its ability to maintain the military and political structures necessary for its survival, ultimately contributing to its historic collapse. The decline and eventual fall of the Roman Empire were significantly influenced by the pervasive issue of inflation, which eroded the economic stability and social fabric of one of history's most formidable civilizations. As Rome expanded, the costs associated with managing such a vast empire, from military expenditures to infrastructure development, escalated beyond sustainable levels. The Roman government's response, particularly the debasement of the denarius, attempted to address these fiscal shortages, but ultimately led to hyperinflation that undermined the currency's value and trust in the economic system. This inflation had far-reaching effects, impacting everything from the daily lives of ordinary citizens who struggled with soaring prices and diminishing purchasing power, to the morale and loyalty of the military, crucial for defending the empire's extensive borders. The economic difficulties were compounded by social unrest and political upheaval, as weakened economic conditions fostered an environment ripe for conflict and succession disputes. The story of Rome's economic downfall provides critical lessons for modern economic policy. The first is the importance of maintaining a strong and stable currency, which is foundational to a healthy economy, facilitating reliable trade and investment. Modern economies must manage their monetary policies carefully, avoiding the pitfalls of excessive money printing or debt accumulation that can lead to inflation. Additionally, Rome's experience underscores the need for sustainable fiscal policies that do not rely solely on expansion or exploitation for revenue. Modern governments can learn from Rome's failure to adjust its fiscal policies in response to changing economic realities. Instead of overextending themselves, states today must ensure that their spending is sustainable and that they have diversified sources of revenue that do not disproportionately burden future generations. Furthermore, the Roman example highlights the necessity of addressing not just the symptoms of economic crises, such as inflation, but also their underlying causes. This might include structural reforms to promote economic resilience, such as diversifying the economy, improving governance, and investing in social programs that can help mitigate the effects of economic downturns. The economic collapse of Rome teaches us that even the mightiest of empires can fall if they fail to manage their economies wisely. It reminds us of the critical need for prudent economic management, the maintenance of fiscal discipline, and the importance of addressing both the symptoms and root causes of economic issues. By learning from the past, modern societies can avoid similar pitfalls and strive for a stable and prosperous economic future.